Because apparently one of the globalist goals was to create a wave of millions of refugees from Muslim countries into Europe, a satanic agenda to create chaos in Europe and to downgrade and degrade the Christian Western heritage. And so to this very day now, on average, 25% of Europe is now Muslim. And in places like Belgium, it's 60%, Troy. 60% Muslim.
I know.
And there are areas the police can't even go into. It's creating literal chaos in Europe.
Well, and you brought up a point as you were mentioning all of these wicked governments. You mentioned the globalists that are a part of our government. That kind of lately, Joel, I've been feeling like maybe have I been living in a matrix? Was the United States was there ever a time where we could be proud to be Americans? Or has that just been a facade?
It's been a facade since the beginning of the last century.
So what's going on? Israel said yes, Hamas said no.
No, Israel did not say yes.
Oh,
actually.
I thought they did. Okay.
Well, that's what the Biden administration says.
Will there ever be civil war in the United States, or something maybe on a lesser level that might begin and then end quickly, or something that will begin and never leave? Folks, welcome back once again, Brother Joel SKOUSEN, to the program. Now, I haven't done this for a while, so I want to read your bio. I don't think I've done that the last couple times, but Joel SKOUSEN, Joel M. SKOUSEN, born on September 22nd, 1946 in San Diego, California. He is an American author, survivalist, and political commentator known for his expertise in strategic relocation and survival architecture. Raised in Oregon, he served as a USMC fighter pilot during the Vietnam era and graduated from Brigham Young University. SKOUSEN is the founder and chief editor of the World Affairs Brief, which we will mention here in a second. He is a weekly news analysis. It is a weekly news analysis service, and he has written several books on survivalism, including Strategic Relocation, North American Guide to Safe Places, and The Secure Home. He has been involved in politics, notably running as a candidate in the 2024 United States presidential election for the Constitution Party. SKOUSEN is a vocal critic of globalism, communism, and U.S. interventionist foreign policy. He has supported figures like Ron Paul, who is, I think you are pretty good friends with.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. And Chuck Baldwin in past elections. He survived a crash landing of his Glass Air. Is that how you pronounce that?
That's correct.
A Glass Air kit plane in 2013 and currently resides in Orem, Utah. You have to tell me about that sometime. SKOUSEN's work often focuses on designing secure yet inconspicuous homes, and he has consulted in architectural and retreat design in North and Central America. He is the older brother of economist Mark SKOUSEN and the nephew and conservative of the conservative author who we all know and remember, W. Leon SKOUSEN. Anyway, I haven't done that for a while, so I thought I would give you a little plug there. Welcome back to the program, Brother SKOUSEN.
Thank you very much. So let me tell you a little bit about my plane crash, because there was a miracle involved there. It had a fuel blockage just as I was approaching the Spanish Fork Airport, returning from a business trip to Las Vegas. And I tried to glide to make the runway, but realized I wasn't going to make it. So I headed for a field that was right near the airport. But my landing gear wheel clipped a fence post just as I was crossing the fence to land in this field.
Oh, wow.
And the airplane cartwheeled and completely self-destructed.
Oh, my goodness.
And
did you eject or something?
Well, let me tell you.
Okay.
I broke my seatbelt, which is 2,000 PSI test strength, very strong. It broke the seatbelt, but I didn't fly out. my glasses were 100 feet away, but not me. And I ended up I remember the whirling sensation of tumbling, but I didn't hit anything, and ended up sitting on the wing with my feet on the ground. And I stood up and turned around, and there was the destroyed aircraft, and I was fine, not a
Oh my
scratch.
goodness.
So the EMTs, the emergency crews came out with their fire trucks and immediately wanted to take me to the hospital. And I said, I'm actually fine. And they couldn't believe it.
That
Seeing this destroyed aircraft, and I'm just standing there looking at it, and I'm fine.
That's amazing. That is definitely divine intervention. Divine intervention. Yeah.
Because you don't break the seatbelt without going somewhere.
Right.
You know, because you're putting 2,000 psi on that seatbelt to break it, and you don't go anywhere. And
you don't even do you remember when the seatbelt broke?
No, all I remember, I didn't feel any pressure on it. I just remember tumbling, and I was free sitting on the wing. The fuselage completely cracked open around me. It was just all destroyed. Wow. But I was sitting on the wing with my feet on the ground,
and unscathed.
Unscathed.
And you're here today. Well, in 2013. Yeah. Wow. What a story. Okay, so the World Affairs Brief, what is that and how do we get it?
Well, the World Affairs Brief is my weekly news analysis service, and it's not just repeating the news. It is from a conspiratorial perspective, what the secret combinations of power, what the deep state is doing behind the scenes in world affairs, whether it's the war in Ukraine, whether it's the Israeli-Hamas war, and there's always secret plans and negotiations and deals being made, and I try to discover what those are and relay those to you so you know what's really going on in world affairs. It is available at worldaffairsbrief.com, and if is a modest subscription fee of $48 a year, about $1 a week. For my analysis, it's unique. There's no other analysis like it, and you can get a free sample copy at the website by clicking on Request a Sample, and it tells you the various options of how to subscribe by the month or the year or every 2 years.
All right. Thank you so much. I enjoy it myself. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is, I asked you yesterday what you would like to discuss, and you said we should probably discuss the ceasefire deal that has not started yet, correct?
Absolutely. In fact, the title of my brief is The Ceasefire Deal That Wasn't.
Okay. Well, okay. So there's 3 parts to it, right? And what's going on? Israel said yes. Hamas said no.
No, Israel did not say yes.
Oh, actually. I thought they did. Okay.
Well, that's what the Biden administration says. They say it was an Israeli crafted with Israel's cooperation, though there are clearly too many contradictions with Israeli military goals for that to be true. At its core, the Biden plan calls for a 3-phase deal. 1, a 6-month ceasefire, the release of most hostages, mainly women and children. Number 2, the release of all hostages, and then the removal of all Israeli forces permanently. And then $3 billion in international aid. Actually, he says that Israel taxpayers will rebuild Gaza under the direction of the Palestinians. Well, in contrast to this, which Hamas has not accepted and Israel has not accepted, you see, the Biden administration seems desperate for a peace deal, probably for political reasons because of Biden's failing, presidential ambitions, though they're going to steal the election from Trump, so he's going to be reelected if he's the candidate. Hamas, in contrast, wants a guarantee of permanent ceasefire, a guarantee that, in other words, that no matter what they do, that Israel will never attack them again. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Before the release of remaining hostages. And secretly, they also want assurance that Israel will not continue to target Hamas leaders for assassination. And that's not going to happen.
Wait, back up. You just said Hamas would never attack them again, or Israel?
That Israel would never attack Hamas again.
That's part of the deal. Okay.
Hamas, no, this is what Hamas wants. This isn't part of the deal.
Okay. I see.
This is Hamas countering, saying we want a guarantee of a permanent ceasefire before we release any hostages. A permanent meaning, no matter what we do, Israel can never enter the Gaza Strip.
We want to fire rockets over there occasionally, but you guys need to just let us do that. Yeah, right.
And secretly, they want assurances that Israel will not continue to target Hamas leaders for assassination because Israel said we're going to kill them all. Because they're terrorists.
Right.
So Israel says that they will not accept the an end to hostility until their military goals are met, i.e., the elimination of Hamas, prohibiting its ability to return and rule in Gaza. Further, Israel refuses to allow the Palestinian Authority to rule Gaza, which the U.S. wants, claiming they want to turn it over to the people, which is impossible without being ruled by some political organization like Hamas or the PA, Palestinian Authority. So they'll either do a name change and say we're no longer Hamas, or we're no longer Palestinian Authority, and then they'll turn it over to the people. It doesn't make sense. But I don't think, in fact, there will ever be peace within Israel and Hamas. It will eventually lead to the Battle of Armageddon, which is much more than the Arabs fighting the Jews. But there can never be peace because there's just too much hatred between Hamas. They preach hatred to the Palestinians. And when you do that bombing campaign, as Israel has done, it's going to create hatred. They're going to be revolutionaries from now until the second coming, trying to get back at Israel.
What do you think is going to happen then? That they're going to continue to fight?
Well, here's what I think is going to happen. I mean, Israel is in control of the Gaza Strip now, except for a small enclave that Hamas is still fighting from. Israel wants that cleaned out. They want Hamas revolutionaries captured, dead, or exiled and eliminated. And I don't think they're going to accept anything until they get that. In fact, remember, as we've talked about in a previous episode, Israel allowed this war to happen by withdrawing 80% of the Gaza brigade from southern Israel and moving it up to the West Bank. That left the entire portion of southern Israel totally undefended. So that and they knew this attack was coming. They had intelligence. They tracking all the cell phones. They had the fence completely wired with sensors so they could tell even if a cat brushed up against that fence. They dismissed all of the warnings that this attack was coming and let it happen. And I think they let it happen because they wanted to have an excuse to go in and take out Hamas permanently. And so they had to make it look like Hamas did it, when in fact Israel is just as responsible for the hostages as Hamas because they left them unprotected.
Right.
Now, that's what happens when you're dealing with a deep state. They have a deep state operating. It's a globalist deep state under Netanyahu. The prime minister is a Kissinger protege. They paid for his education in the U.S. They set him up to become wealthy in Wall Street, and they set him up in politics in Israel. He's a puppet of the globalists who believe in creating chaos and conflict so that they can talk their governments into things which they would not normally do. And in terms of background, the Israelis used to have Jews living in the Gaza Strip, very prosperous, living on the coast and providing a lot of kosher foods. They used to grow a lot of food there on the Gaza Strip. Israel decided it was too costly to protect them. They kicked all the Jews out of Gaza, put up a big fence and said, this will solve the problem. Of course, it didn't solve the problem. The Palestinians have been importing arms and explosives for years and preparing homemade and rockets under the guidance of Iran until they have attacked at least twice now. And this was the largest of the attacks that they've made. But Israel apparently wanted this attack so they could go in and clean it out, rather than admit they made a mistake. So I don't think there's going to be any way that they're going to be able to have Gaza in any sort of independent status, because they'll just get rearmed again. And, the two-state solution is absolutely bogus. Lebanon is an independent state, for example, and Hezbollah in Lebanon is armed to the teeth with 150,000 rockets. Now, they've shot off about 2,000 or 3,000 so far, but they've got a lot more rockets, and that's what Gaza would turn into if it were an independent country. So Israel simply has to occupy it, I think, again, and that's going to be very costly. And they'll always be sniping at the soldiers, but at least they can keep it from becoming an armed camp like it did before in its semi-autonomous condition.
So when did what was the exact year that the rocket firing from Gaza started? Wasn't that like in the mid, 2008? Or was it way before
when they made
that?
When they made their first strike, yeah.
So for about about 14 years, it's been going on, just nonstop.
Well, they've been rebuilding since the Israel went in and cleaned them out, but they always succumbed to U.S. pressure to have a ceasefire before. And that's why they stopped. They stopped short of routing out Hamas. And that was a mistake. They should have done it when Hamas was much, much smaller and much less capable than they are. And they had many fewer tunnels there. And there are tunnels all the way from the Egyptian border on, and they were able to smuggle in a tremendous amount of arms and ammunition and rockets and rocket motors and explosives. They would even dig up water pipes, metal water pipes, and turn them into rockets, pack them with explosives, and put a nozzle at the end of it, and unguided completely, but it's a recipe for disaster. So, I disagree with the Israeli tactic of letting it happen, just as I disagree with the Roosevelt administration allowing Pearl Harbor to be attacked so they could get us into war. It's just wrong to sacrifice your own civilians. And they knew that Hamas was going to take hostages, and that is what has made this such a ruthless war, because to go in and root out the hostages without killing them, and they have killed some of them because they've been put in harm's way by Hamas. But unfortunately, you see, the Jews have a very divided concept of life after death. Some of them believe that there's a resurrection. Some of them don't believe in a resurrection. But in any case, Jews generally have a lot of weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth at the death of anyone. They just don't have a long-term view of heaven and earth as the Christians do. And so it's a very sensitive thing to have military deaths in Israel. And that's why they've chosen to spare the military by bombing the civilians. And of course, Hamas plays a role in that, in putting civilians in harm's way and not letting them leave when Israel does give warnings before a bombing to clear out of a building. Hamas doesn't allow it. They want civilians killed. And they do have command and control centers and military headquarters in hospitals, in schools, and other things to guarantee that there'll be civilian casualties. So there are no good guys in this war. And Christians have to get over the fact that the Lord promised to return the Jews to the land of their homeland, but that's already happened. It wasn't because the Jews were righteous. It wasn't because the government was righteous. There were a bunch of Marxists in the original Zionist organization that created the state of Israel. The Histadrut, or the major labor union there, controlled the country like a Marxist dictatorship. They had communes and in your kibbutzim, which is a communal type farming apparatus. They would take children away from families and raise them by a committee, and all kinds of Marxist types of things that Israel was founded on. So it wasn't based on righteousness at all, but because of the promises that God makes to the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's fulfilled those promises. Doesn't mean that Israel is a righteous country.
A lot of symbology there. So we can't forget Syria and ISIS. Like, what's going on with that? Are we having issues over there too at the same time with Israel?
Only of our own making. We've got to remember that the U.S. created the crisis in Syria by importing terrorists from Libya and Tunisia. That's what the war in Libya was all about. It wasn't because Gaddafi was such an evil person. He was a dictator, to be sure, but a rather benevolent one, used a lot of that oil money, most of that oil money, for schools, hospitals, and even direct welfare to the people. So when the United States took him out, it was to create chaos, and it was to allow Libya to be taken over by radical Muslim Brotherhood, and they imported those terrorists then into Syria and called it a civil war. Well, it's true there was some opposition in Syria because Bashar al-Assad, the present ruler of Syria, is the son of Hafez al-Assad, which was a tyrant. And he ran a torturing deep state operation in Syria that was aligned with Russia, but he also did torture for the United States. There was a case of an American who was turned over to Syria to torture them on behalf of the CIA, done by Hafez al-Assad. But his son, Bashar al-Assad, is not the same person. He was a mild-mannered, educated man in Britain with a medical degree, married to a British citizen. He isn't running a tyrannical state. He has to still deal with the deep state left over by his father, but he's not the tyrant the U.S. makes him out to be. But they had to go into Syria because Syria, the military in Syria, was always a threat to Israel, and that's why they wanted to take down Syria. And they were going to do so on the basis of the fact that Russia shipped out all of the chemical weapons that were in Iraq prior to the Iraq War, and they shipped them to Syria. And so the U.S. was going to attack Syria based on that premise that they were in possession of weapons of mass destruction or chemical weapons. But Bashar al-Assad said, "You can have them. We'll give them up. Send in your inspectors and take away the chemical weapons." So that disarmed the U.S. attempt to invade Syria over the chemical weapons. That's when they started to import the Arab jihadists, the radical Muslim Brotherhood and other people from Libya and Egypt and Tunisia into Syria and created a civil war. Then they took 50% of those, when that wasn't working very well, they took half of them and renamed them ISIS. So ISIS was a creation of the U.S. deep state. It wasn't autonomous. Remember when ISIS started, it came out of nowhere?
Yeah.
And suddenly it had weapons depots full of millions of dollars of weapons. Iraq was telephoning the U.S. and saying, "Look at these weapons depots are being built up in Iraqi territory. Where are these coming from? You got to attack these things." And the U.S. said, "No, we won't do anything about it," because they didn't tell Iraq, but this is our creation. And so they sent ISIS on a rampage through Iraq, and eventually, sent a lot of the ISIS people into Europe to create terrorist events. Now you say, why would they do this? Because apparently one of the globalist goals was to create a wave of millions of refugees from Muslim countries into Europe, a satanic agenda to create chaos in Europe and to downgrade and degrade the Christian Western heritage. And so to this very day now, on average, 25% of Europe is now Muslim. And in places like Belgium, it's 60%, Troy. 60% Muslim.
I know.
And there are areas the police can't even go into. It's creating literal chaos in Europe. And one of the reasons, as I covered in tomorrow's World Affairs Brief, why in the EU parliamentary elections, the right wing in most major areas have made significant gains, especially in France, in Germany, in Italy, and Austria, and a few other countries, because people are so fed up with the climate agenda of shutting down farms in the name of carbon pollution and letting immigration or Muslim immigration into the country, which is still continuing, and high inflation, which is destroying the value of the euro. So this is the globalist agenda, creating chaos and using primarily war to do it. And so that's what's happening in the Middle East. And Israel's part of that globalist agenda. Netanyahu is a globalist, and he created this war with Hamas. And of course, the Americans are part of that. That's why they always called for a ceasefire before Israel could win the war with Hamas to create another war later on. So it's never going to end. That's the sad state of affairs.
When we're this conquer and divide, that's basically what it is, right? What's going on in the Netherlands and in Britain. Was this something, to your knowledge, I don't know if you know or not, do you know or do you feel that this was something planned decades ago to divide and conquer with the Islamic nation of refugees and people like that?
I think that's a simplistic term, divide and conquer. It's much more complex than that simple type of description. There is disunity in all Western countries now between right and the left because we have bred socialism in every country, including the United States. We've got benefit corrupted majorities in Europe and in the United States so that we can't win an election if they actually voted. You just take away the benefits of people in the United States and you watch them. Only 60% of registered voters vote, and less than half of Americans are registered voters. I mean, people have to understand that Republicans are only 47 million in this country out of 350 million. We're not even a major minority. We're a minor minority, but so is everybody else. But the purpose is not divide and conquer. The purpose is to boil the frog slowly, get people corrupted by socialist benefits and corruption morally. It's the Gramsci strategy, the Italian communist who had this strategy, taught the Marxists how to destroy a nation from within by moral corruption. And that's why they've concentrated on controlling Hollywood for so many years, taking over Disney.
Well, why does it seem like they send? Sorry why does it seem like they send so many single males into a lot of these countries?
Well, in the first place, these people are not tied to their families. They're males of independent age. They don't have jobs because of war. They're evading the draft or being put into the military or into the hottest organization. They're the perfect uh, family, or not families, but persons to send out rampaging through the world. And they do create and havoc in Europe, for example. The level of rape in Sweden, for example, just skyrocketed when Muslim men came in because they see all these blonde haired, blue eyed, good looking Swedish women, and the rape is tremendous. And it is in Europe as well. They just don't do well within a society, that is built on cultural Christianity. But that's part of, remember, these are satanic agendas too, is to destroy Christianity, destroy Western culture, create conflict and disunity. And
it's multi-purposed, basically.
Yes,
it's not just
exactly.
one reason.
Exactly.
Right. And I think that's what I've learned. The cabal doesn't do one thing for one reason. They like to, they're very, they like to utilize their wicked devices for more than one cause.
And sometimes they don't even know why they're doing it. They're just following orders. And when I say that, for example, we used to think that the wide open border policy allowing all the Latinos into the United States was just so that they could vote Democratic. And that was probably one of the original things. But now they're letting in people from Africa. Not only Muslims, but very angry people who get angry the Latinos have done very well in the United States in terms of going out and getting work and taking over construction jobs and working for small wages and really working hard. I've worked with a lot of Latinos in my life in the secure home business. But the Africans are a different mix completely. And I think that they're being shoveled in here because they're going to create chaos someday. When the grid goes down, when this war comes and we have an EMP strike and the grid goes down, all these millions of discontented people in camps now, in refugee camps, hating that they're being like in prison-like conditions now and they're not being allowed to have the American dream they were promised. When the grid goes down, they're going to be a major source of chaos and crime in the United States. Now, the single military-age Chinese are coming in there as a fifth column. China's clearly sending in people that are savvy, intelligent. These are not poor refugees like from Africa and Latin America. These are people who are trained militarily to come in and buy up a lot of drones, and they've had invasions in military bases in the East Coast, for example, swarms of drones flying over and taking pictures of everything on the military base. And the military is totally unprepared to stop that kind of intrusion. But I think that's part of the Chinese, about 30, 40,000 that the Biden administration has let in. They shouldn't be able to come in and claim asylum. They're too intelligent to be claimed that they're being persecuted, in China. Yeah. China's sending them in, and that's why China's bought up a chain of hotels from Ecuador through Mexico. And they have maps of where to go from hotel to. These are not economic refugees. These are not people fleeing terror in China. These are people with maps who are going from hotel to hell, hotel to hotel, getting to the United States and being let in. This is a really satanic agenda, and I'm not sure everybody involved in it knows. They're just taking orders, but the people at the top know.
Well, oh yeah, even Chinatown. I read this article that here in San Francisco, they have communist police there.
Yes, they do.
Telling the Chinese citizens what they're allowed to do, what they're allowed to say about China, what they can write, and the local government there allows it, almost applauds it, celebrates it. It's sickening.
And the Chinese are running small-scale bioweapons labs in the U.S. The Biden administration is letting them get away with murder. They shouldn't be allowed to even buy property in the United States. They're buying up big tracts of land next to military bases and other things. This is something that should never be allowed. You ought to have to be a citizen to be able to own property in the U.S.
Yeah. Let me ask a crazy question here, because I was going to ask you about Ukraine and Russia. Do you want to hit on that really quick? Because I have, and after that, I want to put something in your head here for a second. Will we, and don't answer it yet, but do you see civil war in our own country or some sort of civil unrest someday in the future close to that? Which one do you want to talk about first? Ukraine or?
Well, let's talk about Ukraine.
Okay.
The Russian offensive has now stalled. Just in time, of course, the U.S. has been able to get resupply of artillery ammunition to Ukraine and other munitions and ATACMS missiles and other things. And so they're doing a lot of damage now, long distance to Russian supply areas. But the artillery shells that have come in have stopped and blunted the Russian offensive. They're not making any progress anymore around the Kharkiv region. And so now we're back to a point where, Russia is not going to be able to conquer any more of Ukraine. And so they've turned back to the issue of striking infrastructure and civilian infrastructure as well as energy plants, trying to make it more and more painful for the civilians. This is clearly not a Christian president, Putin, trying to defend himself. This is an evil, organization. Of course, our own government, is evil, is a bunch of globalists and things, but there are no good guys in this future third world war. The communist Chinese are not good guys. The Russians fake their own demise. They're still communist, not good people. And the Ukrainians are corrupt because when the Soviets faked their own demise, they didn't remove any of the communists from bureaucracy. They still were taking bribes. That's why Burisma happens. Too many, former communists still running corruption in the country, but still the Ukrainian people do not deserve to live under a reconstituted Soviet Union, which is Putin's, purpose in retaking the Ukraine to start reconstituting the Soviet Union. They gave it up under a ruse, but they didn't mind NATO being on their border. I mean, look, we gave them Kaliningrad, which is a armed missile military camp right next to Poland in the midst of the Baltic states in Europe. Kaliningrad has up to 100 nuclear weapons stationed right there. But you see, because the communists never removed any of their people from Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Putin has dozens of spies in those countries that are working inside NATO. So he doesn't mind those countries being next to NATO. And besides, he already had the Baltics on his border, so he can't complain about having Ukraine be a member of NATO.
Right.
But in any case, this is a complex issue of corruption. There are no good guys. There are innocent people involved, but including innocent Russians that are being sent to the front without proper preparation.
Yeah.
But Russia's not the good guy. That's what I need to tell conservatives and things.
Well, and you brought up a point as you were mentioning all of these wicked governments. You mentioned the globalists that are a part of our government. That kind of lately, Joel, I've been feeling like maybe have I been living in a matrix? Was the United States ever? Was there ever a time where we could be proud to be Americans, or has that just been a facade?
It's been a facade since the beginning of the last century.
Wow.
Now they haven't controlled every presidency, but they started with Woodrow Wilson.
Like before World War I?
Oh yeah, he was a totally controlled president. They put him into office by talking Teddy Roosevelt to run as a third-party candidate to split off the vote from William Howard Taft, who was a conservative. And so that's how they got Woodrow Wilson. And he was a controlled puppet. He had been immoral as president of Princeton University. And as governor of New Jersey, they had the goods on him. They could control him. When he left office, he said, I hate to say this, but there's a power so dark, so deep in control of the government that I dare not speak about it.
Wow. And that was back in, oh my goodness.
That was back in 15 through 24.
Yeah. And then Woodrow Wilson.
Now, they haven't controlled every president since then. They didn't control Herbert
But you're
Hoover.
saying let me just say that you're saying the 19th century, our Constitution was operational.
Yes, it was. And there was minor conspiracy and things like in the Civil War and post-Civil War type of thing. A lot of corruption, was surfeiting around the Civil War and the carpetbaggers in the South, et cetera. But still, the Constitution was pretty much operational. Although the Civil War itself was a violation of the Constitution and the states' rights, which was the main reason for the Civil War, not slavery. It was federal control over the states that it was fought for. But yes, it was turned in the 20th century is when they really got heavily involved in control. Now, there was an Illuminati ever since the 1700s. They were present in the founding of the country and then turned into the Masonic order, which, Satan keeps maneuvering and shifting from one organization to another. So when one gets discovered, he has two or three other. Now there's up to 30 to 40 globalist organizations. It's like a major shell game. You can't find out who's who. They're just all involved. It's a huge operation now.
Yeah, it's interesting. 6 years ago, I went down all those. That's how I found out about you. I think everybody that's gone down a rabbit hole has ran into you somewhere on the
well,
internet.
I am one of the top experts in conspiracy
Yeah,
in
you are.
the United States and the world, and I have the facts. That's why nobody wants to debate me. Not on 9/11, not
No.
on JFK assassination, not on the war in Iraq, not in ISIS, not in any of this stuff, because they'll get embarrassed.
Yeah. Okay, so let's how much time do you have left?
Well, let's see, about 20 minutes.
Okay. Will there ever be civil war in the United States, or something maybe on a lesser level that might begin and then end quickly, or something that will begin and never leave?
No, I don't believe so. Not in the traditional sense of civil war about them versus us. There is that them versus us going on right now, but there is no sentiment among the vast majority of conservatives to rebel or take up arms against it. No sentiment whatsoever. They're too busy fighting for their financial lives, trying to keep ahead of inflation, let alone to think of taking them. Now, there's a small core of several thousand hardcore militia types that would take up arms against the government, but that would be a fool's errand. It would give the government an excuse to target every conservative as a potential domestic terrorist. But there just isn't any sentiment among conservatives to take up arms against one. And one of the reasons why I'm running for president is on the Constitution Party rather than the Republican Party, is the deep state controls totally the Democratic Party, but it only controls the top levels of the Republican Party. And when they steal the election, it's very interesting to watch how they do it. Yeah, they stole it from Donald Trump, but they made sure that it was only 6 states that they stole it in. Mm-hmm. Actually, it was 7, including Virginia, which wasn't counted as one of the swing states, but they stole it from Trump in Virginia as well. But they always keep it close because they want conservatives to be wedded to this. We're almost there in the Republican Party. We're almost winning. We don't want to deal with the Constitution Party because they're too small. We can't win. We want to deal with the Republicans because we're almost there. We can just get a few more votes. But you see, the deep state keeps it that way to keep conservatives wedded to a controlled party, which they can never win with, and to a candidate like Donald Trump, who, even though he has a heart that would like to see Make America Great Again, he is totally incapable of draining the swamp because he doesn't know anything about conspiracy. Oh, he knows when he's been betrayed. He knows that James Comey's deep state, but he doesn't know how to tell who's not deep state, so that when they feed him another name like Christopher Wray, then he puts him in as the head of the FBI, and he was deep state. How do I know that? Because he was involved in the cover-up of 9/11, part of the 9/11 Commission. So was Robert Mueller. So was Bill Barr. He was involved in conspiracy clear back in the George H.W. Bush administration, Iran-Contra, importing drugs through the CIA, the Vietnam War drug problem, and it just goes on and on. But if you know even a modicum of conspiracy history, facts, not just theory, but facts, you'll know that these players that they put into office are controlled. Even Brett Kavanaugh, as I've said to you before, the conservative jurist, he's deep state. How do I know? Because he was part of the Vince Foster murder cover-up by the government, claiming it was a suicide. He had a major role in that. So when they need somebody to flip their vote from conservative to liberal on the Supreme Court, they pick John Roberts first and then Brett Kavanaugh if they need another vote because they're deep state.
Wow.
You got to know this stuff, you see, to be a president of the United States. Now, I'm not going to be elected president, but I want to be able to tell people the truth. So when this war happens, when they steal the election from Donald Trump, when all the terrible crises that we're facing right now continue after this election, they're going to know only one person told us the truth, and that was Bull SKOUSEN.
Well, and people, I hate to say it, I don't want Trump to lose, but maybe him losing might get people to open their eyes more people to open their eyes and finally admit, you know what, we're under tyranny.
I'm hoping that's true.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I understand that there's a tremendous amount of sympathy effect for Trump. We are outraged at the conviction for these 34 felony counts, trumped up with felony counts that they would not even name. Said there are 3 possible felonies. Pick one, but you don't have to determine as a jury what felony. You can convict him of a felony without naming the felony. Mm-hmm. I mean, you talk about a basis for appeal, and Trump's stupid lawyers are only going to appeal on the basis of bias of the judge. They're not going to take issue with these jury instructions, which are terribly flawed. That's the basis for appeal.
Yeah,
but it's really bad, Troy. And but hope springs eternal. I've talked to people as I speak around the nation, and they just want to vote for Trump to send a message to the deep state. You can't do this to an innocent person. That they don't realize. In my message, you'll send a bigger message to the deep state if you vote or write in someone like me, who they know is a conspiracy expert. That will put the fear of God into them more than voting for Donald Trump, because they don't really fear Donald Trump. They fear his followers. They fear.
Well, it's always been about the deplorables, not Donald Trump himself.
Yeah, because Donald Trump is not that savvy. He lives by briefings. He doesn't do any homework himself. He watches Fox News, and he'll never get a conspiratorial idea in his head from Fox News. But conservatives just want a black and white. I just want a savior. I want somebody who can be my champion. So I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. But it's a wasted vote. They're going to steal it from Trump. It's a wasted vote.
Yeah.
And that's my message to people.
Well, and not one man can do anything either. There is no savior except for the savior. And especially now. And people don't realize how deep your average American doesn't know conspiracy. And you've said that yourself. But I would say from 5 years ago, more people have opened their eyes than there were. Like, people stopped calling Alex Jones a conspiracy theorist when they saw that he was right about a lot of things.
But now they're taking him down.
Yeah,
he'll be off the air probably within.
Is he still on Twitter?
Yeah, he's still on Twitter.
Okay.
I mean, he can continue to post. He won't go away, but they're going to take away his broadcast studio and they're going to sell it, and it still won't relieve him of that $1.5 billion defamation, which was the greatest travesty of justice. He never defamed any specific. He never named any specific person, even though he was wrong about it being, that nobody died. And later, even on a show, I was able to convince him, yes, people did die. It was a deep state operation, but not because it didn't happen, but because it was a mind-controlled shooter. Didn't even use an AR-15. Those were still in his trunk. He used a pistol. And there was another backup shooter in the school that was led away in handcuffs. One kid told the television, there's this other guy who was led away in handcuffs. And the police never admitted who that was that they took into custody. That was the handler. That was the deep state handler who was there to make sure he committed suicide or to kill him if he didn't. I mean, this is just incredible. That's what Alex Jones should have concentrated on rather than getting hyped up about it. Never happened.
All right. So where do we go from here? I want to ask you something that's been on my mind. A couple people have sent me emails about this. Do you know anything about Hollywood? Like, we see and the deep state in Hollywood. I know that as far as Freemasonry, the Scottish Rite is pretty deep into the Hollywood. There's a lot of producers, directors, and entertainers that for some reason happen to be in the Scottish Rite sect of Freemasonry. Do you know anything about Hollywood and how, I don't know, what the secret combinations are there?
Well, I know about as much as most people know. You've got to remember that Masonry thing is passé now in terms of the major vehicle that is used. It was big in the 19th century because of the Brotherhood Pact of Protection. You would show a Masonic sign, and of course, and Joseph Smith joined the Masons for the protection issue as well. And he showed some Masonic signs to his fellow Masons who were outside the door shooting at him, and it didn't stop him. It didn't offer any protection at all. The founding fathers had joined Masonic things because of the protection element that it offered. It didn't mean that they were part of a satanic cabal. There's a lot of people that join globalist organizations that aren't globalists. They're just mainstream people and told, hey, this is the thing to do if you want to join the Aspen Institute, go to Bilderberg, do this and that.
Well, because it's not the organization itself. It's what people are doing. A few people in that organization are doing.
And like Bilderberg is kind of like a leadership training. So they're testing young and up and coming leaders to see how they react to these globalist plans, to see who they're going to pick to promote. So just because you attend doesn't necessarily make you a bona fide member of the globalists, just like the World Economic Forum leadership. Most of those people are vetted and do become globalist leaders, but there's some that they put through the training that they don't. Just like in the National War College, which is a globalist training school for U.S. military generals and admirals. And the ones that don't buy into the globalist training that they get don't get promoted. So you've got to be very careful. This is a very complicated. There are many reasons for people getting involved in globalism without being fully aware of. In fact, I'm convinced that most of the people in the World Economic Forum don't know that the globalists are going to pull a third world war on the world, and that they're never going to see an AI robotic society. But they allow these people who have these leftist transhumanist ideas like Harari and others, and to pontificate and to talk about these pie in the sky ideas, but they don't have a clue about the horrors. Satan is running the show, and he wants the destruction of the world. He wants the destruction of as many people as it can. And I think World War III is going to start that level of destruction. I don't think the world is ever going to be the same again after it. And so we may have 3 years, we may have 5 years, we may have, may go even past 3030. I'm not sure when it's going to happen, but I'll tell you, don't waste any time not preparing. You ought to focus all your preparation on getting ready for war, because it's going to happen, and the life will never be the same after it starts, and you'll never be able to do an ounce of preparedness once it does start. Without electricity, you can't prepare. You're going to have what you have, and that's it. And I'll tell you, most people are going to be caught flat-footed.
Yeah, so true. Thank you so much, Joel, for being on the program once again. And any last words? You look tired.
Well, just remember, Troy, the Lord will always preserve a remnant. But you qualify as a remnant for how much you listen to the promptings of conscience right now about preparing, about getting in shape, disciplining your children. I know you're working at it. But disciplining your children, making sure they don't go astray. You can't depend on BYU to put truth into your children anymore. They get trained in the woke philosophy there and in evolution. In fact, there's a book out now, a terrible book in the church about trying to convince Mormons that evolution is the way that the God created the world. And it's just silly, and it's stupidity, and it's blindness. And
I mean, where do we stop? You might as well just take God out of the equation then. If God had to use evolution, then what did he do? He can't take matter unorganized and organize it.
It's just so silly. In fact, evolutionists just laugh at the concept about guided evolution. Said, no, evolution means random. There's nothing guided about it. It's pure mutations and random, and my point is, with command and control of the universe, you can't be a Mormon without understanding command and control, not only of intelligences, but every particle. And that's how miracles are done. Miracles are not done by Newtonian physics. They're in contravention of physics. You simply command the elements, turn rock to water, the storm to cease. If you don't believe in command and control, then you have to believe in gods and angels pushing molecules around with their fingers to make a storm stop. That's the only alternative. There's either physical Newtonian physics or there's command and control.
Well, if people knew their conspiracy, they would know there's mortals controlling the weather. So why can't God and angels do it? Right? And
but mortals are controlling it by Newtonian physics.
Right.
Angels do it by command of the elements. And that's essential to it, because you can't tell if anything is ever a mutation. If there's command and control, you can't tell if the Lord's doing it for testing purposes or what. Right. There's no way to tell, you see, once you know that there's command and control. And so The point is, though, that you have the paradox of perfection. There are things like the eyeball that don't work until they're perfectly formed. They cannot evolve. There are complex protein chains within the body that depend on every part of the chain working. You cannot evolve that. It has to be complete before it works. The feather doesn't work until it's complete. It doesn't allow any advantage whatsoever until it's complete. So this is proof and powerful evidence that evolution is not how things happen.
No.
And,
Well, I mean, I believe Adam and Eve lived 6,000 years ago.
Well, that's right. And he did, he did live nearly 900 years, and
Right.
There wasn't a lot of disease at that time. And and he said, in the day that thou partake of this, you'll surely die. And the day that he said that was 1,000 years. So it was literally true.
Right.
But you see, evolutionists don't have a clue that the Lord built this planet from other parts of other planets. So the materials may be as old as they think. The fossils may be as old, but they weren't necessarily on this planet when it was created. And the Lord actually put this planet together as part of a test, and he put the seeds of fake evolutionary evidence because he wants to have people have an excuse not to believe in God. He provides the excuses. And that's important for people to understand the sophistication of this Earth life test. But I can tell you that evolution had no role in the creation of the Earth, none. If there was mutations, it's always negative. I've been to a museum in Austria. We have all the mutated animals that they've been able to stuff and find. 3-legged deers, 2 heads and 4 eyes, and they're all dead because they don't work. There isn't a single beneficial mutation. The Lord does things by creation. In fact, that's the whole purpose. The Lord isn't sitting moving his finger and doing all the work himself. He loves to have people in biology and stuff trained to how to manipulate and work and design DNA to create new plants and animals for different environments. These evolutionists, biologists, are going to be so embarrassed when they get on the other side. They're going to be one part of the design team of the Lord to design new animals and plants, and they'll be disqualified because they refuse to believe in the creative powers of command.
Well, I always say if you don't believe in intelligent design, then how are we intelligent beings? And like you said, the 4-eyed deer, how does random selection or whatever they call it, how does that determine that I need 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth if it's not an intelligent process?
And what's the purpose of being after this sort of life? If everything's going to be done by evolution, why does God even need us to become trained, intelligent beings?
Right.
It's because he does everything by delegation and training up people and letting them participate in the design process. And, people don't realize, these intellectual scientists, that by denying the creative powers, they are disqualifying themselves from taking part in the grand design labs of the next world.
That's right. Thank you so much, Joel.
My pleasure, Troy. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Sorry that we did this in the evening, but we'll do it next time. You probably had a long day. All right, take care.
All right, bye now.
Bye-bye.